Hey there folks at the Chelsea Fringe Fest. This is Richie Steffen. I'm the Executive Director of the Elisabeth C. Botanical Garden in Seattle, and I'm also the President of the Hardy Fern Foundation, and I'm going to show you how to build a fern table. Fern tables are a really wonderful way to bring the essence of the woodland into a small setting and into urban environments. It's really beautiful and a lot of fun and a great way to have an interesting planter for a shady spot. And so let's get to putting this together. Okay, the first thing we need to talk about is the table itself. For a table, you just need anything that's flat. Kind of the bigger the better, but anything probably more than 18 inches wide and 18 inches long will do on there. So you can do these fern tables on small spaces. The smaller they are, the more you gotta water them during the summertime. The first thing we'll do on this table is put down a little soil. All right, now this soil that we use is a really well-draining mix. It's, you know, here in the Northwest, we have availability to a lot of compost, wood products, and that sort. So ours is a mix of compost wood chips, compost, and perlite. Not everyone's going to have that. So any good, well-draining mix will work. And so, and you might be thinking to yourself, well, ferns like a lot of moisture. And that's true, but they also, many of them like drainage. And so we want to make sure that we have drainage. And so we'll put down this layer, we'll spread it out. And then the next step is to make sure that we block this in so that the soil doesn't wash off. And we'll do that with a couple of things. First of all, we'll use pieces of wood. And so this is a piece that I pulled up out of the garden. It was at the bottom of our fireplace pile, and you see how beautiful that is, rotted and really naturalistic looking. And so we'll just kind of tuck that in. And really, you should use wood that just occurs on your property. It really gives it a sense of place. You can also, if you have a small lot and you don't have wood, you can use stone. You can use anything you want to do this. We are at a botanical garden, so we have a lot of this lying around, and it'll do a good job. We'll also use stone in this, and so these are pieces of basalt, which is one of our native stones here, and I really like to use stone that occurs in the garden or in your space. And so if you have round stone, those will work. Any sort of thing will work. And so we're just looking at trying to place these around so that we can keep that soil from washing off right away. And you just kind of, this is the part where creativity takes place. You want to figure out how these pieces fit together, how they're going to look, and how you want them to hold in. You know what? This one just won't work right now. We're going to put that aside. We're going to put a few more stones in here. Oh, not over there. There we go. And just be really creative. You know, I have a little space here that fits just perfectly, and then I could tuck this in. And we're getting to a point now where you don't have to enclose the whole thing, but I forgot about this. That will look awesome running through. Wait a minute, it wants to turn. Maybe it goes this way. Okay, so we have a base here to work with, and so now we're ready to add our first plants. One of the things I really like about these fern tables is they're creative, they're organic, and I really try to get as much height as I can so this really piles up, and I plant thick and heavy. You want to make this look just like it came out of the woodlands right away. You don't want things to have to grow in and fill in it. So you're going to pack a lot of plants. And so let's pull a few plants together. And ta-da, plants. So we have some pretty good sized ferns on here. You don't have to use all tiny things on this. You could use something with some size. The idea is that these are just like any other mixed container in your garden. You put things in, they look good for a while, and then whenever it gets a little worn, you take them out or you switch them out and put in something else. A lot of these can go right from this fern table into your garden later, or if you don't have garden space, they could go into another pot and do really well in there. So the other thing that you find is sometimes whenever you pick these up, there's a few little bad fronds on there. Just clip those off before you pluck them in, and we'll toss those behind me so no one sees them. And also I noticed whenever I was dragging this around, I broke a frond, and so you just pop those off and you don't worry about it. No one will ever know. It's just between you and me. So let's start. We're just going to place a few focal point plants in here, and then we're going to build up another layer. So I'm not quite ready for this big guy yet, so I'll set him off. And over here I have a nice little spot, and I have this really adorable little tiny fern. This is a Splenium trichomanes, which is maidenhair spleenwort, and this is a really cool fern. It is native here to the Seattle area up in the mountains. This is also native to the UK. You could find this all around the world in the mountains, in the northern hemisphere in the mountains. And so let's just pop him out of the pot, and you can see he's ready to come out. And don't worry about trying to break up these root balls. We're going to keep this nice and moist and growing, and these roots will grow right out without us teasing them apart, especially on the ferns. And so I'm going to open this up a little bit, move some soil, and put that in there. And you know what? It's just a little too fat for in here. And so what we'll do is, because we're going to keep this fertilized and watered, we can be a little rough on these. And so we're just going to squeeze this thing down, and we're going to make them really flat. And we're going to just make them fit in there. Whoops. And we're going to put another stone on top. Put a little soil underneath it to keep that stone perched up. And there we go. We have a little fern growing out of a crack. We do have things other than ferns in the fern table. We use other woodland plants. This is a mini hosta. And here in the Northwest, we grow slugs by the pound. So whenever I put these little mini hostas in the ground, they always get chewed up for me, and so I almost always use them in containers, troughs, and they are perfect for fern tables. They really look good in here. It keeps them above most of the slugs. Every once in a while one climbs up and gets in here, and so we're going to tuck that in. We'll break him down a little bit, knock off some of that soil. We'll loosen that up, and we're going to tuck that right into that little space. We'll angle them out a little bit so you really see them nice, and we'll pile that on. And whoop. Now I love this fern. This is Ethereum otophorum, eared lady fern. The new growth in the spring comes out kind of minty white, and then it always keeps this wonderful kind of pale green quality to it with purple veins. It is just an elegant plant. And so you can see that this is a little tall, but I'm going to just wiggle that in there, and we're going to build up around it and make it work. This is this one's a little dwarf soft shield fern, Polystichum sativum congestum. This is one of the UK native ferns. This one's actually an old Victorian cultivar that's been kept in cultivation till now, and it's a really easy fern to grow, evergreen, and I really try to do a mix of evergreen and deciduous ferns, so this looks good all year long, and you get this sense of seasonal change because some things die down, some things are sprouting up, and we'll tuck that in right there. Pile a little bit more soil in there, and don't worry about making a mess. That's what good gardening's all about. pile that up a little bit more. And let's get another cool log. And we'll make that a little higher. So I got a little pocket right there. And here we go. I have a flat of ferns that we've been growing at the Hardy Fern Foundation. And so I'm going to just pop a fern out of there. And it is rooted in really well. And we'll just shake it on out. This is another old Victorian cultivar. This is Dryopteris Felix Maz. And it's being sold on the cultivar name of Parsley. But it is an older Victorian cultivar, and that name escapes me. You know how those Victorian cultivar names are really long? This one is one of those. So we'll pop out a couple of them here, and we'll put this back. And out of those two, I kind of like that one. So we will tuck that in here, and we'll snuggle that up. We'll put a little soil around there, and we'll let that fill in that space. And then we'll take this one and we'll tuck it over here behind it. Put it in a little bit. Get that all settled down, and I think we need another rock or two. A little something to hold up the pile. All right, when you're putting this together, you want to think about how you're going to be looking at it. Is this going to be only viewed from this side, or is it going to be viewed from both sides? If it's going to be viewed from both sides, as you're putting this together, take a step back and look to make sure that it looks good. And so I'm not quite sure where we're going to put this yet. And so I'm going to make it so that both sides of this look good. And so when I put this up here, I'm starting to get a big pile and nothing here, no greenery. And so I'm going to fix that. So back here, I have a little place to tuck something. And let's see. I'm going to grab another one of those little blue hostas that I really keen. This one is one called Gemstone, and it really is a beaut, isn't it? And we'll break that out, dig this out, whoops, and we'll shove that in. Pile it up, and I still have a little pocket there. So this is what we used to call a fern ally. This is Seliginella, and this is a golden spike moss. And it's not a real moss, but it really looks that way. And it does super in this. It's a plant that doesn't really like to dry out. And it sometimes it will die out, but then it'll always seem to sprout up somewhere else. And so it'll wander and move around as this table settles in. It'll look good this year, but then it may die out next winter, and then I'll have it pop up somewhere else, and it'll fill in where it needs to. So we're going to make that fill in that little space. And we'll see at the end if we can't turn this around and give you a little view of what I did back here. So I'm going to dig this out because I think we are ready for this guy to go in. There. It's a pretty tall fern. It's a real statement. And you see I got a couple of bad fronds here in the front, so I'm just going to take those out. There we go. And then that just looks fabulous. This is Korean rock fern. It's another evergreen fern. It is a really beautiful grower, very upright like this, and just shiny evergreen foliage. We're going to put that in there, tuck this around, and then I'm going to see if we can't tuck this stone in behind to hold that in place. I cannot forget to put in one of my favorite ferns. Look at that. This has big leathery fronds. This is Pyrosia lingua, sometimes called felt fern or tongue fern. And it's native to Southeast Asia, and it grows on trees and rocks in the moss. And so this is really perfect. It has running stems that are running around here. And so what we'll do is we're going to place this right up in front so that it can actually run right over the edge and hang down a little bit. And we'll tuck them in. All right, let's see what we have now. I think we need a little something back here. So I am going to get another little fern here. This is another cultivar of soft shield fern. Well, it was just really stuck in there. It's another cultivar soft shield fern called Polystichum saetiferum divisilobum, and so it's a very nicely divided leaf, fully evergreen, very tough and hardy, a real good doer in the garden and in containers. And so we're going to fill that in. And so now we've created our second layer. We're going to build this up again. So I got another really cool log here. And I think what I'm going to do, I really want this, I think, I love the way how these have rotted out and they look all spiky. It reminds me of old Victorian stumperies a little bit. And so we're going to, I think, we're going to try to show that off. So we're going to just perch this in here, kind of up high. And you can see there's a little gap here, but we'll fill that in with plants and we'll pile in some soil. And I have another piece of log here, which is really one that's not totally as rotted as that, but it's getting there and it's very sculptural looking. And so we're going to work that in. Maybe we're going to work it in. Let's just see what we can do here. I think it'll hold. All right. Now, let's start filling in the holes. All right, I got a big hole here. I'm gonna just pop up here and we're gonna tuck. I think that's maybe a little too big. I think he'll look better there. But I don't have any soil in there. So I'm gonna need a little bit more soil. One bag of soil gone. You got to make sure those roots get down there and they're touching soil. You don't want the fern just hanging there in the air. All right, one of my favorite groups of ferns are maidenhairs. And look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Fine, delicate look. Many times these are thought of as tropicals, but there's a number of hardy ones. This one is one of our West Coast natives. It is Adiantum tracei, Tracy's maidenhair, and it's a rare hybrid between two of our West Coast species. And you often wouldn't see this around, but it's recently been tissue cultured, and so it is kicking around some. It's not very common still, but it is around. And we'll just pop that out. And look at that laciness. We're going to slip that into this hole and kind of just add a nice lacy touch in here. And that is really, we'll scoot a little soil around that and kind of fill that in. And with that big strappy leaf of the Pyrosia, with that little maidenhair mixing in, it'll be really lovely. Whoop. My little hosta's getting run over there. Another fern that I really like is this one. This is a polypody that is also native to our area. This is Polypodium schuyleri, leatherleaf polypody. It's evergreen. It's very thick and leathery. I know that this can be found in the UK. It's mostly available on the West Coast. It doesn't like heat and humidity, so you need to keep that in mind. And it is a spreader, but a very slow spreader. And so we're just gonna put that in there because the roots are really dense on it, and it'll help keep the soil in place as this grows. All right, and let's see what else we have. God. You know how I was saying that I loved maidenhairs? This one's another one that I really absolutely adore. It is Adiantum eluticum imbricatum, compact western maidenhair, and this one has this very delicate leaf, very hardy, and only gets to about 12 to 15 inches, about 12 inches tall, maybe 8 inches tall, give or take. So we got to find a little special spot for that. And I think what I'm going to want, well, I think I'd really like to have it over here. And so we're going to tuck that in, clean off some of that soil that I slopped around there, and we're getting really close to having this all filled in. So now we have a lot of green going on here. I really want to break that up a little bit, so I'm going to grab a couple of more mini hostas that are going to fluff this out. All right, here are those mini hostas I was talking about. Aren't they beautiful? They are really, really wonderful plants. Let me set these down. I think what I'm going to do is use this variegated one with that creamy white edge because it really gives a nice pop in there. So let me set that there. I'll set these off to the side, and let's get that into the ground. All right, it's setting up a little high, so I'm just going to take a little soil off of that. And we'll just tuck it right in there. There you go. Ooh, pushing the logs around. Doesn't that look good? So we're getting close to having all of our major plants in. Let's just see if we can't tuck in another plant. You know what? I'd love a little maidenhair here. So I'm going to grab another one of those Adiantum tracyi. Ooh, look at that. Wait a minute. Nope, I do like that one better. All right, let's squeeze that one in. So sometimes these have roots coming out the bottom like that, and it does not hurt them at all to just pull those roots right off, toss it to the side, slip it right out of the pot. So we'll tuck that behind. And that'll be a really nice background for that. Okay, so now I think we're ready to do a little detail work. All right, we're going to do a little detail work, and we're going to start over here. And whenever you look at this, you can see that there's these pockets of soil. We want to really try to hide most of that and fill in these little gaps and that sort. So sometimes I'll take a little soil to make sure and push it in there to make sure I have all the air pockets out. But look at that. That's a Legionella. That little spike moss is going to be gorgeous in that spot. Toss that over, and we're going to slip it right in there. Look at that. It was like it was built for that. And we'll shove it in there, fluff it out, and then it'll grow and fill in there. And we have another little pocket over here. And you know, there's a number of saxifrags that'll tolerate shade. So this one's a cute little saxifrag that I picked up at a local nursery. And we will pop that out. Now, there isn't a lot of space in there, so I will have to break off some of this soil. Get a little pot. I'll try not to make too big of a mess. But there we go. We have some of that soil down, and we will just kind of tuck it into that hole. And look at how pretty that is in there. That is really gorgeous. So now we just have little bits here and there. The first thing I'll do is maybe take a little soil and fill in any holes that I see around. Put a little bit in there, we'll dump that in. And then nearly the last thing I'll do is here in the Northwest, we have moss on there, and we have a moss in abundance. And so this moss I gathered on my at my home. I have a nice little mossy patch that I'm getting ready to plant with other things, and so I saved the mulch on, saved the moss here, and it's really beautiful. And you know, you want to be aware of, you just shouldn't go out into the woods and collect moss on there. Not all places are like the Northwest where we're rich in moss. And so if you have moss on your property, that is actually probably the moss that's best suited for it. So try to only collect moss off your own property on there. If you have a friend or something like that, you can ask their permission to gather moss from their place, but don't gather moss from out in the wild because it generally will not transplant well into the garden. And so what we'll do with this is I'm going to take a few chunks out, and I'm just going to break it apart and work it into some of these holes and divots, and add a little bit of that'll help hold in some of the soil. And this moss may live, it may die, but if it dies, for us here in the Northwest, it's a great bed for new moss to come. So even if this doesn't make it, generally new moss will grow up through it and replace it. Grab a few more pieces to fill in, and I have a little bit to tuck in here, and some up here, and you can see how that's a nice finishing touch. Now if you just don't have access to moss, don't worry about it. There's a lot of ground covers that can act the same. That little spike moss that we saw, that can be used for the same purpose. And often if you get a nice full pot, it can be divided into more than one plant and then tucked in. So now let's find a place to put this. You'll slip that guy back there and let him fill in, and then we'll take this one and we're going to tuck that one back here. Now, another ground cover that's really pretty sweet are baby tears. This one's a golden baby tear, and you know, I'm using a lot of gold, but that's because here in the Northwest, we have a lot of cloudy weather, and this gold really brightens up areas, and really, it looks great against the green of the ferns. And so these little golden baby ears are another thing that can be used as a ground cover and as a moss substitute. So you don't have to have moss. One of the last things I'm going to do here is, you can see on this edge that we could still see quite a bit of the table. And so we're going to just take a little moss and just pack it right in and make that edge not so noticeable. All right, and so you can see how that looks pretty well finished. One of the last things I'll do to this is, sometimes I just want a little bit more interest there, and so I'll look for some either a few interesting bits of wood to work in, or an interesting pine cone. This is a pine cone from one of our trees here at the garden. This is Pinus sabiniana. And it's this one's a small pine cone on it. These pine cones can get up to 2 pounds, and they're spiky and sharp, so you don't want to be underneath that whenever it drops. So we could tuck that in there, and it's just kind of an interesting little element. So now let's switch over to the other side and do a little work over there. All right, so now we're ready to finish off this area, and I have a lot of little pockets to fill in. And so what I did is I saved one of my containers, filled it up with my potting soil, and you could really see how chunky our potting soil is. Those little chunks of composted wood, and then these little bits of pumice. And one thing about potting soils is you want to use pumice rather than perlite. Perlite will float to the top. It's really bright white, and you'll see it, and it'll kind of run over stuff and really be kind of a little ugly, I think. And this pumice doesn't do that. It'll float a little bit, but it's not as obvious, and it really adds great drainage. Not everyone can find this because it's a volcanic rock, and recently in 1980 or in 81 we had Mount St. Helens blow up, and it left us with tons of pumice, so we can get a hold of it here. Ask around at your local nursery to see what they recommend for good drainage. Sometimes it might be a little gravel or something of that sort. Just avoid perlite. Now we'll fill in a few spots, and we have enough room over here to tuck in a, oh, right, here's another little spot. We'll just fill that in. Now we have enough room in here to add a couple of more plants, and so I think what I'll do is I'll tuck a little Saliginella in here, because I think that would be really cute. And then we can take one of these saxifrags and, whoops, and we'll push this fern over a little bit, and we'll put that right in there. Clean some of that off of that stone, make it pretty. And I think we're pretty good. One other thing I'd really love to work in there, but I just don't think I can. I have this little vine. This is a little euonymus with little tiny leaves, Euonymus fortunii cuensis, and it's a really adorable plant and would grow really well in here, but I don't think it's going to fit in here this time. All right, we're almost ready to come back in and do a little moss. We'll set that right there. And so back behind here, you see how I have some root balls exposed, so I want to try to cover those up and make those fine, and it's just too much to just pile some soil in there. So I'm going to take one of our little rocks, and I'm going to snuggle that in there and kind of protect those root balls with the rock. And now we're ready to moss this up, and we'll just tuck that in and around. And here you could see how much that board shows. So what I want to do is I'm going to just lift that up a little bit, slide that moss underneath, and we'll put it in place. And we'll take another piece and do the same. We'll lift that up, tuck it underneath some, and and if that's too much moss showing, we can always, let's see, we can always take a cool little rock and we can put it there, but if you don't like that, that's probably just big enough for our martini glass. So, it's always nice to put a little place to place your drink while you're working in the garden. All right, we just about have the moss finished in place here. There's just a little bit in the front here. There's a little gap underneath this log, and so we're just going to take a couple of pieces, tuck them in, and then we're ready. So now, one thing to keep in mind is you have all these plant tags, and you don't want to forget what you have in there. So what do you do with them? I don't want to just stick them around, because then it starts to look really messy with these showing. So to keep these all together, and whenever I take this apart to place them with them, I'll find a little stone or something like that, and I'll just hide them underneath. And they're there whenever you want them later on. All right, now we are pretty much finished, and so our fern table is just going to stay right here. But if you had to move this somewhere, you need a couple of strong arms to move this, because it does have a little weight. And the other thing that you need to do is, when this gets moved, it's easy to knock these pieces of wood and stones loose. And so often what I'll do is I'll take a little nylon fishing line or a couple of jute, a little bit of jute twine, and I will wrap it around this and tie it off to keep it in place while I move it to a new location. And then once it's there, then you could take it off again. For long-term care, this gets regular watering. We water ours at least 3 to 4 times a week. We keep an eye on it. We check it every day to make sure it doesn't dry out, especially whenever it starts getting hot in the summertime. And you can fertilize it. We use an all-purpose fertilizer, or you can use something for ferns or acidic plants. And I hate just putting fertilizer over it. I tuck the fertilizer under the moss, under stones, and under logs so you don't see it as much. And that's all there is to it, to have your own fern table. So give it a try. I hope you enjoy and have fun at the Chelsea Fringe Fest.